Hello. Good morning. Is this on? Good morning. This is an open hearing of the independent inquiry into matters relating to Afghanistan. Please could I ask you to ensure that all mobile telephones and other personal electronic devices are either switched off or in silent mode. Please may I also draw your attention to the fact that the Chair of the Inquiry, the Right Honourable Sir Justice Haddon-Cave, has made a restriction order dated the 12th of February 2024 in relation to the conduct of those who are attending the hearing. The full order is displayed on the inquiry website and on the door of this court and of the media annex, but I will summarise its purpose. The first part of the order, which applies to this and to all future hearings of the inquiry, prohibits any person from making an audio or video recording of inquiry proceedings from within the hearing rooms without the express permission of the chair. Furthermore, no person may take a photograph in any room in which inquiry proceedings are taking place and at a time the inquiry is sitting without the express permission of the chair. For the avoidance of doubt, both of these prohibitions extend to the hearing in the media annex. The second part of the order, which applies to the hearing scheduled to take place today, the 21st of February 2024, arises as the live stream of these inquiry proceedings via YouTube will purposely be subject to a 10-minute delay. Where those who have supplied evidence to the inquiry have applied to restrict information from publication outside of the inquiry, in some instances the Chair has made restriction orders, the effect of which is to protect that information. A restriction order prohibits the use, publication or dissemination of the information that it covers. In the event that something is said during the course of this hearing which may breach a restriction order made by the Chair, the evidence may be halted and the hearing room and annex may be cleared for closed legal submissions as to whether any restriction order has been breached, and the live stream YouTube recording will be temporarily stopped for this period. Counsel to the inquiry or the solicitor to the inquiry must be informed of any request to make an application for a restriction order in relation to anything that has been said or done in the inquiry hearing room in the preceding 10 minutes. If an application is made for a restriction order in relation to anything that has been said or done in the inquiry hearing room in the preceding 10 minutes, anything that was said or done during that period is subject to a restriction order prohibiting its disclosure, repetition or duplication until the Chair has finally determined the application. Every restriction order is subject to a penal notice. This means that any breach of any element of the restriction orders may be certified to the High Court or the Court of Session, who will have the power to fine or imprison anyone found to have been in breach of the order. Court rise.
Mr. Mercer. Thank you. You are still under oath. Mr. Glasgow.
Please, you, sir.
Sir, if I may, could I make a couple of points before we start, or would that be inappropriate?
Mr. Mercer, of course the inquiry wants to hear what it is you've got to say, so please, if there's something that you'd like to raise before I ask you any more questions, I would encourage you to do that.
Yeah, so I just want to address a couple of points from yesterday, if I may. The first is that I said an individual had been investigated 11 times. There's actually 8 times, and 3 of those were not formal investigations, and I want the record to be correct. Secondly, and I don't wish to be impertinent here, but I want the inquiry to get to the bottom of these issues. In terms of exchanging sensitive information with the inquiry, confidence yesterday in some ways got worse rather than better, because I dread to think that some of the more junior individuals involved in this would come and be subjected to sort of similar lines of questioning around things like, whose side are you on, murdering women and children, or are you here to tell the truth? This, you know, these I think people like me treat issues like this with the utmost respect. And for a long time in this country, when servicemen have been on the other side in the witness box like me, there's a distinct, that has not been a two-way street. And if I'm honest with you, I want you to be successful and to be able to get this information out to people. That is not going to happen if you don't treat them with that respect. And I think that I will always stand up for these people. We're not criminals. We're not stupid. These are deeply serious issues that I wish to the court to be successful with. And I would suggest that questions such as whose side are you on murdering women and children are not in line with that mutual respect that I have for the court and that I would expect soldiers to be given in return.
Well, Mr. Mercer, if you heard, and I hope you did, what I said yesterday to you after lunch, you can be assured, as I said several times, that the inquiry treats everybody with respect and care, particularly witnesses who come forward with sensitive information. But it is important that those who come before the inquiry to give evidence give their full evidence and do not hold anything back. And it's the job of counsel to make sure that witnesses do give their full evidence. So they're simply doing their job. All right, but I'm glad to hear you say that you are committed to the inquiry succeeding. And succeed it will. Thank you. Mr. Glasgow.
Mr. Mercer, can I take you to your witness statement, please? You have it available in the black file in front of you. Can I take you to paragraph 37, which takes us to August of 2020?
What page is that on, please?
It's on page 13. You'll find it at the bottom of that page.
Yeah.
I'll allow you a moment to get your bearings. I'd like to ask you, please, about that in the next
go ahead.
paragraphs. You identified in that paragraph that further allegations were printed in the Sunday Times and that during the course of that article, the newspaper had quoted from documents disclosed by the Ministry of Defence in court proceedings which you had never seen.
Yep.
You told us yesterday that you had seen an email sent by the commanding officer of UKSF3 to the DSF,
Yep.
but you hadn't seen any other documents.
Yep.
So do we understand that when you viewed the content of this article, were you surprised that there were documents now in the possession of a national newspaper that you hadn't seen before?
Yeah, so, Mr. Glasgow, this is the point where I went within the department of thinking there's a bit of resistance to discovering what actually happened here. It became clear that people were working against me because I had specifically asked, as you covered yesterday, to see all documentation and evidence relating to these issues. I was shown that one note, and then in the Sunday Times, I read emails that had clearly gone back and forth within the organisation, talking about how multiple issues around how widespread this was, how common it was, how many people knew about it. And it was clear to me that, as the minister, I had asked, I want to see everything, and that people were blocking me from seeing everything. And at that stage, I began to, my sort of attitude towards it shifted because I felt very clearly that I'd gone into that department to try and help. And, clearly I'm an advocate for servicemen and women and veterans. But they were happy at senior leadership level for me to essentially be made to, go out there and take the hits and try and bring in legislation, all the whilst knowing this information that I had asked to see existed.
So does that mean that as at early August of 2020, not only were you concerned about things you'd been told by the Secretary of State, by the DSF, and by the Chief of the General Staff, you were now concerned that there was material in existence which you should have been shown but hadn't been shown?
Yeah, because by this stage, the way this was being framed in the media, and I totally understood that, was that I was forcing through legislation, and be under no illusion, this was this legislation was very difficult, very contentious, and I received threats and all the rest of it from individuals in Northern Ireland. And my name was all over this, and I felt like I was taking that pressure to try and do the right thing to stop lawfare, whilst at the same time, the MOD were kind of doing my legs by not showing me, not only coming forward, being proactive and having the integrity to come forward and say, Minister, you should probably see this stuff before you go out and defend this, but actually I asked them specifically, and they didn't do it.
Were you concerned about any possible strategic impact, as you've described it in your statement? Were you concerned about any possible strategic impact on the legislation you were trying to bring in?
Of course, and I made that clear to DSF in my conversations with him, that my concern was the strategic tectonic plates I was trying to manage of getting through legislation that was extremely contentious, had zero support apart from me and a couple of others, through the House of Commons on their behalf, and that allegations, like this, were they found to be correct, would not only torpedo what I was doing at the time, but in my view, this taints the legacy of what I've done, and I made that very clear to DSF.
Did you make that also clear to the Secretary of State?
Yes.
And did you make it clear to anyone else, for example?
Yes, I said the same thing to everyone in private and in public whenever I was asked about this.
Given the nature of the allegations that you had been made privy to, given the concerns you had about the implausibility of what was being said about those allegations,
Yep.
and given your belief that you'd not been told the truth by very senior people in government and the military,
Yep.
did you question whether now was the right time to advance this contentious piece of legislation?
Oh, of course, yeah, of course. But, the way, politics is a dodgy sport at the best of times, right? And whilst when I came into politics, everyone's always wanted to look after our veterans and stop the pursuit of servicemen. When it comes to the actual nitty-gritty of dealing with really difficult stuff, like should they get priority treatment if they've lost their legs in Afghanistan? Should we introduce a degree of legal protection in order to really understand what happened in Northern Ireland? It was a very, very lonely period. And yes, I felt like when that started to sort of become political flavour of the month, other ministers would then get involved, for example, in introducing the legislation around legacy, who at the time, and a matter of public record, I said, had literally no idea what they were doing or what they were dealing with. I believe the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland at the time introduced this idea of an amnesty, which is ridiculous and nothing I've ever campaigned on. But by that stage, I was kind of shut out, because the way politics works is that obviously you can be incredibly unpopular trying to do your thing. Suddenly, when it becomes flavour of the month, other ministers or senior ministers trying to make a name for themselves will seek to adopt that and start, trying to influence things like legislation and come up with mad ideas like an amnesty in Northern Ireland.
In your discussions with Peter Ryan, you told him in a passage that was deleted from the readback, that you told him that you were unconvinced that there was no truth to the allegations being investigated by Northmore.
Yeah.
So at the time that you're advancing the legislation, did you still believe there was truth in the allegations being investigated by Northmoor?
At the time I was advancing the legislation, I, yes, had serious concerns around what I was being told around up Northmoor. But you have to understand, Mr. Glasgow, I was not the Secretary of State. And I was a junior minister doing my job to the best of my ability in as professional way as possible. So I put my hand up. I said I wasn't happy. But at the end of the day, you know, you're operating as part of a team in government. You know, and you have to get on with it. But I would say to you that when that Sunday Times piece came out, and I flew up to London on the 5th of August 2020 for an emergency meeting, yeah, things took on a whole new sort of pallor, really.
Can you help us then with that meeting, please? So you,
sure.
As you just said, you flew up to London. This is a meeting with the Secretary of State, and who else was present?
So Secretary of State was there, Dominic Wilson was there, there were, DJEP was there, a team of lawyers were there, yeah.
Prior to the meeting being held, did you have conversations with the Secretary of State or with any other senior
Yes,
figures?
on the telephone. And I also spoke to Chief of Defence Staff.
So that's a telephone call with the Secretary of State and with the Chief of the Defence Staff.
Whilst I was away in France on holiday, I spoke to both of them.
And did you raise with them your concerns that you've just explained to us?
Yes, so there were two issues. One was that it was completely unacceptable that I'd asked to see this information, and the first I read about it was in the Sunday Times. Secondarily, I was very cross that I had been allowed to make a statement in the House of Commons in January that year that was clearly incorrect when faced with the evidence that existed within my own department. And for me, that was a kind of red line being crossed in terms of, you know, we're not on the same side here.
So, in effect, the concerns as you explained them, were they that you were, would it be fair to say, angry that you had not been told the true picture?
Yeah, look, Mr. Glasgow, I don't disguise the fact that I am angry with these people. The fact that I'm sat here today going through this is because they have not done their job that was incumbent upon them with their rank and privileges in those organisations. And yes, I am angry about that.
And when you say them, can you tell us who those individuals are?
Senior leaders within the Ministry of Defence and within UKSF.
So, Director Special Forces?
Well, of course.
Chief of the General Staff?
Of course.
Chief of the Defence Staff?
I felt like the Chief of Defence Staff recognised the seriousness of this situation.
Secretary of State?
Yeah, my time in that department was very difficult. I did not enjoy it, and it placed me in a number of very, very uncomfortable positions.
Were you angry at the fact, as you say, you believed that you had said something in the House that was inaccurate?
Of course.
And was there a sense that you were being hung out to dry here?
No, there was a sense that I was being gamed the entire time.
So
and
gamed.
that my name and me basically was being used by these actors in order to, well, I don't really know. I don't know why you wouldn't, if someone like me came into the department, I don't know why you wouldn't see that as a good thing and, you know, work collegiately to try and get to the bottom of what are very serious allegations.
Did you feel that you were being used to advance the legislation and, in a sense, to put a spin on it?
Yes, and that's why I ended up writing a letter to Secretary of State.
And can I assure you, we will come to look at that letter,
Sure.
I promise you, Mr. Mercer. I just want to get to the stage where the letter is written, because
Sure.
various phone calls are made following the article and its revelations, and then there is a meeting,
Yes.
and then the letter was written.
Sure, sorry.
Have I got the chronology correct?
You have got the chronology correct.
When you spoke to people on the phone, as you said, you made your concerns clear, and they are the concerns you've just explained to us. At the meeting, did you raise those concerns again, now face to face with the relevant individuals?
Very forcefully.
And if that's correct, would it be fair to say that no one in the meeting could be in any doubt of what your views were at the time?
I don't think anyone could be in any doubt of my views at any stage throughout this entire saga.
Did you explain to them that you believed that what you had been told by the Secretary of State, the Director of Special Forces, and the Chief of the General Staff was not true?
Could you repeat the question?
Did you explain to them that you believed what you've been told by the Secretary of State, by the Director of Special Forces, and by the Chief of the General Staff was not true?
What did the Secretary of State say to me that I thought was untrue? I don't think I've said that he misled me.
You did, Mr. Mercer. You told us yesterday that 3 people gave you explanations and you didn't believe them, that they were therefore untrue. You named the Secretary of State.
No. So yesterday I was very clear in that I did not believe the accounts that were reiterated to me from DSF or from CGS. The Secretary of State never gave me an account of this. I gave him my findings, and he said to me, "Well, Johnny, there is no new evidence," and we moved on.
And you
okay,
told us
so
I'm sorry,
at no
Can I
stage.
stop you there? You told us when you gave that piece of evidence that you didn't think that was true. Have I misunderstood what you
Yes, I didn't think that was true, but that's not the Secretary of State misleading me.
Well, if the Secretary
That's
of State
his opinion.
tells you,
No, that's his valid held opinion that there is nowhere else to go. That's not him misleading me.
So in fact what you mean is you think the Secretary of State made a mistake rather
Yes.
than told you an untruth.
Correct, yes.
Well, I'm just picking up on your words, Mr. Mercer. They may or may not be important.
Okay, but you've got to repeat my actual words, because that's not what I've said, and I've never said that the Secretary of State misled me.
What you said was you didn't think he told you the truth.
I said to you, no, that was his honest held opinion. I never said, I don't think the Secretary of State has told me the truth. And I'm happy to be corrected from all the people writing this down. At no stage have I said, the Secretary of State, Ben Wallace, did not tell me the truth, because I don't think the guy's a liar.
At the meeting that you had with these individuals, did you explain to them that information in the form of written information had been withheld from you?
Yes.
Did you tell them that you had repeatedly asked for this information?
Yes, and
not
everybody
been-
knew I had repeatedly asked for it.
Did you explain to them that you were not prepared to be the political force behind the legislation you were seeking to bring in?
I did.
So as at early August, in effect, you were drawing that red line.
Yep.
And as you've told us, they could be in no doubt that you no longer wanted to be the person to champion the bill.
They can be in no doubt of my position. The trouble is, Mr. Glasgow, it's not as binary as is being made out. Yes, you could at that stage just walk away, of course, but that's not the way strategic politics works. It's about compromise, it's about fighting through, it's about getting as much as you possibly can for the people you're there to represent. It's not about flouncing out when things start turning against you.
But I'm just seeking to understand, your view was that you weren't prepared to be the political force behind the bill.
That's what I wrote down, yes.
But you continued to be the political force behind the bill.
No, I continue to try and shape the bills to make sure that if evidence emerged of, I mean, I was very clear that, you know, when I was doing that, that any legislation that I was involved with would not prevent prosecution of individuals where evidence existed, irrespective of time passed.
Were you concerned that the bill might be passed and it might in effect come into law, and that at some point the truth behind these allegations could come out?
100%. That was my overriding concern.
So did you want these allegations to be properly investigated before the bill became law?
Of course.
So did you explain at that meeting to those present that your personal view was that the investigation had to be conducted properly and thoroughly before the bill came into force?
Of course, yeah.
And when you explained that to them, did those present at the meeting agree that that was strategically a good idea?
I mean, I can't imagine them not agreeing, but if I'm honest with you, I don't recall if people agreed or disagreed. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't sort of sat around and it didn't really work out like that. You kind of give your view and then...
So was your understanding by the end of that meeting that there was going to be, if not already in place now, a thorough investigation into the allegations?
I would have thought that, I did expect things to change in terms of, disclosures and the way the MOD dealt with ministers, yeah.
That's not what I asked you, Mr. Mercer. I asked you if whether you expected there to be a thorough investigation, as you've just said you wanted there to be.
I expected the issues to be resolved. Did I expect to initiate another investigation? I felt, having the lawfare and legacy, there's different series of investigations in the way that this works. I always, from that point on, when that information was in the public domain, I could see very little opportunity for the Ministry of Defence to avoid the sort of inquiry we're doing today without proactively instigating it or initiating it. And so, when you say, did you think there should be another big investigation? I mean, I never said, let's have another huge investigation, but it was clear to me that, this needs to be resolved. And our ability as a Ministry of Defence to control that was receding because this information was in the public domain and any normal person reading it would think there's something not right here.
So prior to the first reading of the bill, which was the 1st of November 2020, what checks did you make to see whether the allegations had been looked into and whether the issues were resolved?
Well, by that time I'd been sacked, so I was not in government anymore. So my ability to interrogate the investigation had receded significantly.
I thought you left the department...
Have I got my timings wrong?
It'll be my fault if the timing's
No,
wrong.
well, wait, it'll be mine.
Can we just check? Can I take you to your paragraph 41 for a moment?
Yeah.
So having dealt with the meeting on the 5th of August, you then set out that I left the department 8 months later.
Oh, right, sorry. Yeah, I've got my timings wrong there.
So just checking...
No, that's...
So it
I've been sacked a few times. I don't...
Well, it
get
happens
my
to
timings
everyone.
right.
As at the 1st of November, for the first reading of the bill, you hadn't yet been sacked. So what I want to ask you is...
No, is this the overseas... When you say the bill, there are two bills we're dealing with. So there's the Overseas Operations Bill,
yes,
and then there's the Northern Ireland Legacy Act.
Overseas Operations Bill.
Yeah, right. So the Overseas Operations Bill, yes, I did first reading because I took it through, didn't I? So, yeah, no.
So at the time of the first reading, there's been a period of a couple of months between when you've said, we need to resolve this one way or the other.
Yeah.
I can't take the legislation forward, and there's a red line.
Yeah.
And now there's the first reading of the bill. So what did you do to check that there had been the resolution you wanted?
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to do was correct the record in the House of Commons, and I asked for permission to do that, but I was persuaded that that was not the course of action that I should take by the Secretary of State. What I did was I made sure that within the provisions of the bill, that if any evidence was to come out of this, that the measures in the bill would not prevent investigation of allegations of this nature, and the bill was shaped in that.
That's not what I asked, Mr. Mercer. I asked you what steps you took.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Glasgow. I just said to you that I very clearly worked hard to make sure that that bill could cope with allegations of this nature. So those are the steps I took.
You told those very senior members of government and the military that there needed to be a thorough investigation so the allegations were resolved one way or the other. That's what you've just told us this morning.
No, I didn't tell you that. No, I didn't. You said to me, did you say there should be a thorough investigation? I said, no, I didn't say that. I said we needed to get to the bottom of it. We needed to pan these out one way or the other.
How were you going to get to the bottom of it if there wasn't an investigation?
Because an investigation is a formal mechanism.
So people are supposed to put their finger in the air. I mean, you have suggested that there are extremely serious allegations being levelled against UK SF1. And the allegations are, in effect, they have killed unarmed people on target, and that there has been some sort of cover-up in the aftermath. Those are the allegations, yes?
Yeah.
And you believed, as at August 2020, that there was truth in those allegations, yes?
Yeah.
And you told us that there was a red line for you that you were not prepared to cross.
Yeah.
And you weren't prepared to be the political force behind the bill until you knew that these allegations had been resolved.
Yeah.
So what did you do to see whether they had been resolved before the first reading
So
in
the
November?
problem I've got, and I don't wish to be difficult, sir, and I'm trying to stay, to do this in the correct way. I was asked a number of times if I then asked for a formal for an investigation, should there be an investigation to get to the bottom of that? And I've outlined very clearly that I didn't say that. What I did say was that we needed to get to the bottom of and try and understand what these are. And then counsel says to me, you said there needed to be an investigation. And I'm afraid I simply didn't say that. So whilst I understand that this may be the sort of go-between, the way court plays out, I have to be very careful with my words. And there is a lot of context here and a lot of, the environment in which these decisions are made. I can't say to you that I went and asked for formal investigation when I didn't.
Mr. Mercer, what you said earlier on was that you believe that there should be a thorough investigation. You then said you didn't want there to be a new big investigation. Those are two different things. You believe there might be truth in the allegations, and you didn't want to advance a bill. So what did you do before advancing the bill to allay your concerns?
Okay. But I feel like I'm slightly going mad because I have said that. I worked to make sure there were provisions in the bill that could deal with allegations of this nature.
Did you speak to anyone about what was being done about the allegations?
Oh, regularly. Yes, of course.
Did you ask the Secretary of State whether there was an investigation?
I mean, my conversation with the Secretary of State, I made it clear to him that I thought that the opportunity for us to avoid a judicial inquiry into this was, this was probably the last time that the Ministry of Defence had an opportunity to investigate this stuff by itself.
So if it didn't investigate its stuff, there would be a judge-led inquiry?
I thought there would be, yes.
Right. So by investigate its stuff, did you imagine that there would have to be an investigation?
A formal investigation. I thought that, I don't want to dance on the head of a pin here, but did I call for a formal investigation? No, I called to get to the bottom of, we had to answer these allegations one way or the other. Because, there were two sides to this, either, in fact, we'll come on to that in our letter.
In which case, let's go to the letter, please. You'll find it in your black file, divider number 8. For those who are not following in the file, the reference is the MOD exhibit reference 221 000 4154. That's 221 000 4154. And is this the letter that you wrote following the meeting in August when you'd raised the concerns you've told us about?
Yes.
I wanted to write and repeat formally my long-held concerns regarding the latest dump of emails in the Sunday Times this past weekend surrounding detention operations involving UKSF in 2011. Upon appointment into the department, you asked me to look into these cases with a view to the potential political implications for the Prime Minister's strategic political objective of ending vexatious claims against our people. After doing so, I informed you that I did not think it was credible for UKSF1 to state to investigators that there is no full motion video footage, FMV.
Correct.
of any of the 10 operations Sir John Murphy investigated. Further, it was not credible that when questioned, almost that no number given, members of that unit suffered what the judge has described as collective amnesia. In other words, that harks back to what you told us, that no one seemed to remember what had happened.
That's right.
And you didn't believe that.
Yes, that's right.
I stressed that my only concerns were political. Moral and operational judgments were for others. But having been a long-term campaigner to end the industrial level of vexatious claims against serving personnel and veterans, I expressed very clearly to you, Director Special Forces and Chief of the General Staff, that the small window of opportunity that I had engineered over many years to pass legislation to this effect would be closed if we were exposed for being unable to hold our people to account. That I've now been allowed to read out statements to the House of Commons that individuals in strategic appointments in the department knew to be incorrect is completely unacceptable. These were clearly not complaints by a small number of individuals within the investigations team, but widespread. I've continually downplayed these allegations in public too to support UKSF1 and the department. That was clearly a mistake. I would like to formally request in this letter to make a statement to the House in the first week of September correcting the record. And that, if I pause, that's the record of the exchange that took place on the 20th of January.
That's correct, Mr. Closey.
The strategic implications of a lethal force such as UKSF1 being either so naive as to not collect and keep evidence to protect our people, organisations and nations from lawfare, or unwilling to share evidence with investigators that might implicate them, presents an extreme risk that the political leadership team should not carry. My views have nothing at all to do with my service, a theme I have disappointingly been presented with from you today and heard from others in main building being put about by senior leaders from UKSF1. I have left my experiences a long way behind and am comfortable I've risen to the challenge of being the Minister for Defence, People and Veterans. I'm proud of the way I've navigated the challenges of the role and believe we have delivered in many areas. I am an elected politician who has previously served. That is all. I have repeatedly made clear that my views on this subject are of the political consideration, not the tactical, operational or moral. Protecting individuals, units and indeed the government from lawfare is basic professionalism. That this view has been presented to me, ironically questioning my professionalism, has irritated me significantly. Finally, this whole episode makes me very sad. I, like you, have dedicated my political career to improving the lot of those who serve, both currently and veterans. I repeatedly warned against this outcome, and yet it has happened, and have suffered significant reputational damage in my pursuit of ending vexatious claims that have ruined the lives of so many of our finest people. I will continue in this pursuit, but this boil must be lanced, and I can never be put in this position again. The boil that needed to be lanced, what was that, please, Mr. Mercer?
The allegations concerned with this inquiry.
Right. So you made it very clear in that letter, which must have been written only a few days after the publication of the article in August, because it says at the top, the latest dump of emails this past weekend.
Yeah, so it would have been that week.
So as in early August, you made it very clear in writing that the allegations that you believed there was truth in, that were hanging over the head of UKSF1, needed to be resolved one way or the other.
Yeah, that's always been my position.
Right. So what questions did you ask of people to find out what was being done to lance the boil?
So, Mr. Glasgow, when I write to the Secretary of State and say, you must lance this boil, it's not for me, it would then be impertinent for me to wander into his office and say, how are you going to do this? I've told him what needs to happen. The ball is then in his court. He is the Secretary of State, not me.
Did you ask for an update at any stage?
There were regular, there were... did I go and ask for a formal update? I don't recall doing that, no.
Well, you want the boil to be lanced,
yeah.
And you're not prepared to be put in this position ever again.
Yeah.
And you're not prepared to be the political force behind the bill until the boil's been lanced.
Yep.
All of that you've made very clear to us. And what I want to know is this.
Yep.
Having set that all out, what did you do between early August and the 1st of November that allowed you to think to yourself, it's perfectly acceptable now for me to be the political force behind the bill? You must believe the boil had been lanced.
No, I believed that if evidence was to come out, I had done everything I possibly could to lance the boil, but I was not prepared to come off the strategic line of introducing legislation to protect the 99% of British servicemen and women who uphold the highest standards on operations.
And other than setting your views out to the Secretary of State, the Director of Special Forces, or the Chief of the General Staff, did you do anything else to lance the boil?
I mean, I'm not sure what else I could do.
Or did you say, for example, I have heard information from some of my friends, perhaps you ought to speak to them to see whether there is truth in the allegations that I've received?
I think there's an element of naivety in thinking that I could fulfil the role I fulfil and have the confidence of these individuals by then simply farming their names to investigators who had a track record of going around and destroying people's lives in Iraq investigations previously. I mean, that's not serious.
So your decision was that you didn't want to help the investigation or the inquiry if there was one. Was that your decision, Mr. Mercer?
I don't know
Thank you. There have been discussions, and I maintain the restriction order that I made in relation to one sentence, which appears in the transcript at 11:12:45 to 11:13:42. I maintain the restriction order in relation to that sentence until 6 p.m. this evening. Otherwise, the restriction order which I made earlier is lifted. All right, and the feed is back on now. Thank you. Mr. Glasgow.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry for the interruption. Can I just go back over some of what you had told us just before we had the interruption? And it's simply to this effect. You had told the inquiry that you had spoken to former Afghan partner unit members, so more than one person. They had directed you to other individuals who might have information to give, and that you had spoken to them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what you had told us was the essence of the allegations being made by more than one individual was that members of UK SF1 had shot and killed males and children during the course of operations, and that at the time that those individuals had been shot and killed, they had been restrained and did not pose a threat. Is that correct? And that additionally, children had been hurt during the course of these operations, and that had been a trigger point for members of the Afghan partner unit in not wanting to work with UK SF1.
That was one trigger that was raised with me.
And this is not a facetious question, but can we agree that if true, the allegations that you have recently received could not be more serious?
Well, the allegations that have been presented to me are horrific.
And insofar as those allegations have been reported to you, you've had allegations of, I can tell you about somebody who saw something.
Correct.
And you've been directed to those individuals who've been able to tell you, I saw something.
So there is a language barrier here.
Of course.
But through an intermediary, yes, a trusted intermediary.
So going back to where we were very early on in your evidence, we have not just hearsay or rumour, there is first-hand evidence of allegations of the most serious kind.
Correct.
And to be clear, these are allegations of straight murder.
Yes.
And trying to draw a distinction, which you have explained, between the 99% of people who have served this country with bravery, honour and distinction, who you clearly support, that very small minority who have been involved in these allegations, if true, they do not deserve any assistance from you whatsoever, do they?
If true, I have absolutely nothing in common with these individuals, and I totally reject their behaviour, and I understand. What I would say is that I understand. In the course of this journey for me, I have been to Australia, and I've spoken to individuals caught up in that saga, and I would say to them that we all leave the services, and like I've said a number of times, you have the rest of your life to live, and I've met some totally broken men who have admitted to this sort of behaviour from another country, and it is not worth destroying the rest of your life for not confronting what was a very difficult, very challenging, very complex set of challenges that my generation faced in Afghanistan.
And in terms of those very difficult challenges that your generation faced, would you agree that if individuals have carried out the acts that have been reported to you, those are matters that require the most thorough of investigation?
Of course.
And going back to where you began with your approach to dealing with industrial scale vexatious litigation, in your own mind you draw a very clear line between holding those to account who have not upheld the standards and defending those who are the victims of scurrilous allegations with which there is no truth.
So that has always been a very clear line in my mind, and I think to most ordinary folk that is a very clear distinction to be able to draw. I think clearly if you're on it turns into a political argument and you're on one side or the other, people attempt to blur that line for their own purposes. But to most people, and certainly to operators and my generation of combatants, that is a very clear distinction.
And although when you were speaking of involvement on deployment, you spoke about not looking at black and white and understanding that there are shades of grey, is it fair that when you come to see the sides of the line that you've described just now, that is a black and white line, at least to you?
Of course.
Are you concerned that this inquiry gets to the bottom of these very serious allegations?
100%. I want to resolve these issues one way or the other.
And
there is a personal interest here. This sullies my personal work. And I'm not prepared to accept that on behalf of senior leaders within the Ministry of Defence who failed in their basic duty.
can we leave you for a moment to one side? And that's not meant in a discourteous manner. Please don't think it is. But can we just deal with some of the wider issues at play?
Of course.
Before we deal with those that play on your mind personally. The principal issue at play must be that this inquiry uncovers the truth.
Yes.
Because if there is any truth in these allegations, action must be taken against those involved.
Yes.
Because if there is truth in the allegations, those involved have not just broken the standards that you and 99.9% of the military community live by, they've in effect torn them up and ignored them.
They're criminals that I have no traction with.
And that will enable us as a nation and us as a military force to be seen to uphold the standards that you and those who've served this country with distinction live by.
Oh, it's fundamental to the defence of a nation. The Prime Minister downwards needs to have faith that, firstly, clearly, there is a ruthless, a brutal honesty policy, and secondarily, that the standards to which we are expected to pave on operations are adhered to at every level.
And one of those core values is not only courage, but is in particular moral courage.
Yeah.
And that is moral courage to do the right thing.
Correct.
To call out behaviour that you believe to be wrong so that it can be investigated, and if action needs to be taken, it can be.
Correct.
And those are the standards that you live by.
I try.
And those are the standards that you believe and hope that 99.9% of the military community, be they serving or veterans, live by.
I certainly expect those within UKSF who who expect to be treated to a higher standard to be the chief exponents of those values and standards.
So if anything, we're recognising the moral courage expected of anyone in the Green Army, but you are suggesting that those who serve within UKSF have a higher standard to uphold.
Correct.
It's not that a different set of rules apply to them, but that you would believe them to be, would it be examples of the conduct that everyone else should emulate?
It's all about professionalism. Ultimately, it's all about professionalism. And if you are involved in a relentless pursuit of excellence, there is no space for allegations of this nature to be unresolved for this period of time.
And clearly, in order for these allegations now to be resolved, it's to this inquiry that you are looking for that work to be taken.
Correct.
And plainly, you welcome the inquiry.
Well, I don't want to be here. No,
Yeah, well,
I don't want to.
Mr. Mercer, that's obvious, but in the sense that there is now an official and publicly recognised investigation, this is what you've wanted for years.
I haven't wanted this inquiry. I've wanted to be able to allay these concerns one way or the other, because I am not prepared for A, my personal work to be sullied by it, or B, my generation's service and sacrifice in Afghanistan to the Afghan people and to this nation to be coloured by allegations of this nature. Those two positions I would not accept, and I will fight against. Yes, much like the previous generation had to do with Northern Ireland.
The chair has, on a number of occasions, called on those with information to come forward and to give it. Is that a call that you would echo on behalf of the community that you fought hard to represent?
I would, of course, echo that call. I would say to the community that I represent that, particularly those who lost their lives or were seriously injured, and their lives were never the same after a period of time in Afghanistan. If nothing else, they don't deserve to be anywhere near allegations of this nature. I think that the broad, the much broader cohort of those who supported the Afghans cared deeply about Afghanistan, cared deeply about the Afghan people, had huge respect for those operators who chose to come our side of the line in Afghanistan and, not take the easy route out and just allow the Taliban and Al-Qaeda to decimate the place and so on. And ultimately, it's not rocket science to work out that if you don't deal with allegations of this nature, they're not, I think there's a misunderstanding within the MOD and within other government ministers and so on. The true nature of those pursuing things like lawfare, these things are not going to go away. You can't wish them away, and neither can you just repeatedly say, I don't know. I think that if we are going to move on, then it needs to be dealt with in a professional manner, in the manner that we would expect, and I hope that comes to pass, irrespective of individuals' behaviour up to this point at a senior level. I think there is still an opportunity for them. I've been very clear to say that I don't think anybody's lied to me, because I don't think they have. But I would at the same time say to them that level of brutal honesty in dealing in this space, that standard has not been met, and there is still time to meet that standard.
And is that a call to those with information to come forward and to give it?
Yeah, absolutely, because so I know that some will have given information previously through the correct chains. You got to understand, Mr. Glasgow, to speak about these operations outside of that environment is breaking the law. It is breaking the law. It is breaking the Official Secrets Act. I'm very lucky. I'm a cabinet minister, and I'm extremely privileged to be in that position where I don't feel threatened by that. But these individuals don't have that protection.
Well, can I allay that concern that you've just raised? Because having mentioned this publicly, this information is already available, that we have sought and the Chair has obtained undertakings from the Attorney General that those who come forward and give evidence and speak about these matters will not be falling foul of
Sure,
the
but they don't know that.
No, well, Mr. Mercer, they now do, because as you can imagine, a number of people are listening to what you have to say. So before you interrupt me, sir, it's important that if you're going to make a statement like that you understand whether whether you're right or wrong. You are wrong, Mr. Mercer, when you say that. It may very well be a genuinely held belief by you, but before you suggest that people should be concerned about coming forward because of the Official Secrets Act, it would be prudent for all those who are listening to look at the website and the details that we have provided, and at the assurances this chair has obtained from the Attorney General, because no one should think as a result of what you've just said that they can't come forwards because they might be breaking the law.
Sure, and Mr. Glasgow, I'm talking about, apologies for not making it clearer, but when individuals who have raised this previously, for example, my peers, may have, at that time, before this inquiry, before those assurances were sought, speaking of these matters was breaking the law, and I clearly accept that that has changed, but that community is not aware of that.
Well,
and they should be, and they should read, and so on. But it is down to commanders now at all levels to ensure that individuals are fully appraised of the legal situation of giving evidence to this inquiry.
well, I hope that they hear what you have just said, but the exchange that we have just had will provide a platform for that information becoming more widely known, one would hope.
I sincerely hope so, yeah.
And can I also sincerely hope that you will take that message back to those you speak to,
Of course.
if there is any misunderstanding on the part of anyone that you have spoken to, they can be reassured of the protections that are now in place for them.
Of course, of course, of course. I mean, be aware, Mr. Glasgow, that when, for example, this stuff was raised before by individuals who I'm sure will come and sit here, the law was very clear that where there is allegations of criminal behaviour or suspicions of criminal behaviour, then you refer to the Royal Military Police. And these individuals did not take that decision. They did a TTP review and things like that. So that's where it's not people sitting there not having any faith in you or this inquiry. It's just we have a history of this.
Again, other undertakings have been sought by the Chair and obtained from the Attorney General that those who failed to act as they should have done and to report these matters at the time, they again will not be prosecuted for any mistakes or wrongdoing. So there are a number of assurances that are available that are on the website.
Sure.
And that I would encourage you with your position to ensure that the community you represent is fully aware of, because no one should think as you leave court this morning that there is any bar to them coming forward to talk to the inquiry, or that if they were to admit that they lacked the moral courage at the relevant time to do the right thing, that they would then be prosecuted. Because there is an opportunity for everyone to have the moral courage today to come forward. Would you agree?
I 100% agree with that. Would you agree with me that my generation who've been through these processes before, that hasn't been the case, and so that's what we're up against?
I'm not sure that I'm in a position to understand what your generation has been through, and I think if I were to agree with that observation, that might be an insult to you.
Well, things like the Al Sweeney inquiry and so on.
Of course I recognise those difficulties.
Yeah.
Mr Mercer, I'm not going to seek to put myself in your position or in the position of anyone else who has served their country with distinction. I'm a lawyer, and it would be insulting to anyone who's put on a uniform for me to attempt to do that.
It's very difficult for these individuals who have these experiences that are very brutal, very, tear you apart, and then come back to the UK, try and contribute to these inquiries, and then get treated like the individuals were in the Al Sweeney inquiry. That is the reality of what you're up against. I totally respect all of the assurances that you have, and I will repeat those, and I will go to bat for you because I want to get to the truth, right? But you need to be cognizant, and the inquiry needs to be cognizant that is what you're up against, and so that requires a slightly cuter, defter way of getting to the evidence than perhaps has previously been employed by these other inquiries.
Insofar as you have any concerns about the ability of the inquiry properly to investigate, you raise in your statement the belief that there may have been a culture of omerta within special forces. Page 19 and paragraph 52, Mr. Mercer.
Yes.
Can I check that I have understood and that those who are hearing understand your belief? Is that a belief that within UKSF people keep quiet about what has gone on?
In my experience, that's undoubtedly the case, yeah.
They don't want to come forwards and show the moral courage to tell the truth?
I would not criticise them because, frankly, I entirely understand why, given the way the Ministry of Defence has treated them previously and its ability. You've got to remember that in all of this, right, in all of these allegations over the last 20 years, no one has been held to account. I mean, we had one guy admit something, right? But the rest of the time, the MOD has been unable to prosecute a single case of this. So if you're sat there as a young operator thinking, yeah, I'm going to do the right thing, your motivations to do it are very, very low. So, of course, that generates that culture, and which I entirely understand. So, yes, while I would agree with you, there is that culture, I wouldn't criticise the young operators for it. I would criticise the leadership. I would criticise the officers for allowing that culture to foster.
And if this inquiry and anything that follows from it is to mark a difference between that which has gone before, it's necessary for this inquiry to identify credible information that supports or refutes the allegations that have been made to it.
And I would look at that information with equal, I'd be glad to see evidence that refutes this. As I said yesterday, I'm desperate for this not to be true.
And the inquiry needs to speak to anyone and everyone that may have credible information to give.
Absolutely. Look, Mr. Glasgow, there were not thousands of people who conducted these operations during this time period. The inquiry should speak to every single individual who was on those operations, regardless of whether or not they come forward. Because some will think, well, I'm not going to go forward, but if they ask me, I'm going to tell the truth.
It would help, of course, to know who we need to speak to.
Well, the MOD has a record of everybody who served on these operations, so I'm sure you can find that.
If I were to ask you to confidentially provide the names of those from the Afghan partner units with whom you spoke, who made the most serious allegations we went through a moment ago, would I be right in assuming that, as at today, you would decline to accept that request?
I am going to reflect on the Chair's remarks yesterday and do everything I can to assist the inquiry.
If you're right and that there is a culture of omerta, in effect a wall of silence, do you recognise that when people refuse to assist the inquiry, they might become part of that wall of silence?
No, I don't think it's as... sorry, I think... it depends what you term by refusing to help the inquiry, because you tried to sort of outline yesterday that I was refusing to help the inquiry, which is ridiculous because I'm sat here trying to help the inquiry. So it depends what you mean by those terms.
What I mean, Mr. Mercer, is coming to this inquiry, taking an oath to tell the truth. You are a serving member of government and a cabinet minister, and you refused to answer questions posed by me and then posed by the chair to the inquiry. That's what I'm referring to.
At no stage I've taken an oath to tell the truth. I've always told the truth. I hope you're not suggesting otherwise.
I'm suggesting you've refused to answer questions, Mr. Mercer.
I haven't. I've answered all your questions. You asked me if I would name people in court, and the answer was no. So again, you're saying things that are not correct.
I'm so sorry to stand up, but would it be possible, sir, for you to rise just for a couple of minutes so I can have a very quick word with my learned friend?
Can I pause for a moment? I'm so sorry to speak across court. Could I just speak?
Yes, do you want to go outside for a moment?
I'd rather not everyone have to rise. I'm
Indeed.
conscious that if this can be finished, it should be. I'm sure Mr. Mercer has somewhere else he'd rather be.
Indeed. Mr. Homer, can you go outside with
Yes, of course.
Mr. Glasgow, please? We'll I'll rise. Call me back. All right.
So thank you. Mr. Mercer, I've asked you on a number of occasions about the information that you have declined to provide. You've been advised by the chair and a request has been made of you by him to reflect on your current position. Can I ask you to continue to reflect on that position?
Absolutely, Mr. Glasgow, but you've just highlighted my point that I've tried to make to you a couple of times, in that if you truly want to get to these allegations, to the centre of these allegations, which I believe you do and I believe the chair does, there is no point trying to frame whether I've taken an oath to tell the truth or not. This court doesn't intimidate me. You don't intimidate me. I will try and help you. Let me finish. I will try and help you as much as I can. But that is the same for individuals who will come across this court. They are not intimidated by being in this court. There are greater issues at stake. And you are not going to get there if you persistently say, make out or infer through your questioning that I am not helping you or I'm not here to tell the truth or help the inquiry.
Well, are you here to help the inquiry?
I think I'll let that one go, sir.
Nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Glasgow. Mr. Mercer, I want to say a few things before I release you for today. I don't invite any response, and indeed I don't want you to respond. I want you to listen to the further words I've got to say and reflect on them. You've given a great deal of evidence in the last day and a half. Much of it has been very clear, very candid, and very helpful. And I'm very grateful for that. And you've also spoken, if I may say so, eloquently about quite a number of really difficult issues. As you'll appreciate, this is not the end of your evidence, or indeed your attendance before me, because as Mr. Glasgow has had to say, the plain fact of the matter is that you have, at least for the moment, refused to answer legitimate questions by leading counsel at a public inquiry, and in particular, what are their names? What are the names of the people who've spoken to you about these matters? And I'm bound to say this is frankly very disappointing and surprising, particularly for someone in your position, and, I'm bound to say, completely unacceptable. It gives rise to potentially serious legal consequences which may need to be put in train. Having said that, as I think you'll agree, I've been very patient and I hope understanding. None of this is easy, and I completely get that. This is some of the most difficult material, some of the most difficult memories, some of the most difficult issues that anyone has to deal with. I've indicated that I'm prepared to give you further time to reflect on these matters, and I'm glad that you're going to use that. And I've indicated to Ms. Davidson that I'm prepared to make arrangements for a further closed hearing, a private hearing, to deal with this matter. In addition to the points I made yesterday, which no doubt Ms. Davidson's going to discuss further with you, I want to make a few other points, please, for you to reflect on. The first is the point that's been raised just now, that I want to assure you, and indeed everybody listening in today, that I have obtained a suite of undertakings from the Attorney General and the Chief of the Defence Staff to clear the pathways for people to come and speak to me in the inquiry, either confidentially, directly, or, in a sense, in the witness box in open. And individuals will not be prosecuted, for instance, for having failed at the time to comply with Section 113 of the Act and not reported at the time. And they will not be prosecuted for other matters, because it's recognised that the really important public interest is getting to the truth. And so people can be assured that the pathways to the inquiry are clear. Secondly, as I'm sure Ms. Davidson will advise you, I have, I'm afraid, very significant powers under the Inquiries Act 2005, which I would prefer not to have to use. But you can be assured, Mr. Mercer, that I will, if necessary. My patience is not inexhaustible because I have a public inquiry to run and pursue as quickly as possible in the public interest and in the interest of all those who've had allegations made against them or who have a dark cloud sitting over them, their families and their careers. That is why I have said repeatedly that it's extremely important that this inquiry is pursued at pace. And I and my team have been working round the clock to achieve that. So I'd like you to think very carefully about these points and the one I made yesterday. I'd like this matter addressed very soon, and I mean very soon. To use a phrase you objected to this morning, Mr. Mercer, and to put it, in a sense, starkly, but I think fairly and correctly, you need to decide which side you are really on, Mr. Mercer. Is it assisting the inquiry fully, as Mr. Glasgow has said, and the public interest and the national interest in getting to the truth of these allegations quickly, for everyone's sake, or being part of what is in effect an omerta, a wall of silence, and this wall of silence is obstructing the inquiry and access to the truth, and doing so because of, if I may say so, a misguided understanding of the term integrity and inappropriate sense of loyalty. So I'd like you to reflect on all those matters, and my legal team will be in touch. But can I thank you for coming to give your evidence, which, as I said, has been extremely helpful. We'll rise now. The time is now 12:30. Can there be a discussion, please, as regards the timetable for the next witness who's been waiting? And Mr. Mercer, you are free to go, and I expect you deserve a good lunch. All right? Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is an open hearing of the independent inquiry into matters relating to Afghanistan. Please could I ask you to ensure that all mobile telephones and other personal electronic devices are either switched off or in silent mode. Please may I also draw your attention to the fact that the Chair of the Inquiry, the Right Honourable Sir Charles Haddon-Cave, has made a restriction order dated the 12th of February 2024 in relation to the conduct of those who are attending the hearing. The full order is displayed on the inquiry website and on the door of this court and of the media annex, but I will summarise its purpose. The first part of the order, which applies to this and to all future hearings of the inquiry, prohibits any person from making an audio or video recording of inquiry proceedings from within the hearing rooms without the express permission of the chair. Furthermore, no person may take a photograph in any room in which inquiry proceedings are taking place and at a time the inquiry is sitting without the express permission of the chair. For the avoidance of doubt, both of these prohibitions extend to the hearing in the media annex. The second part of the order, which applies to the hearing scheduled to take place today, the 21st of February 2024, arises as the live stream of these inquiry proceedings via YouTube will purposely be subject to a 10-minute delay. A restriction order prohibits the use, publication or dissemination of the information that it covers. In the event that something is said during the course of this hearing which may breach a restriction order made by the chair, the evidence may be halted and the hearing room and annex may be cleared for closed legal submissions as to whether any restriction order has been breached, and the live stream YouTube recording will be temporarily stopped for this period. Counsel to the inquiry or the solicitor to the inquiry must be informed of any request to make an application for a restriction order in relation to anything that has been said or done in the inquiry hearing room in the preceding 10 minutes. If an application is made for a restriction order in relation to anything that has been said or done in the inquiry hearing room in the preceding 10 minutes, anything that was said or done during that period is subject to a restriction order prohibiting its disclosure, repetition or duplication until the chair has finally determined the application. Every restriction order is subject to a penal notice. This means that any breach of any element of the restriction orders may be certified to the High Court or the Court of Session, who will have the power to fine or imprison anyone found to have been in breach of the order. Court rise.
Can Mr. Nichol assume the witness box, please?
After me, please. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God
That the evidence I shall give.
that the evidence I shall give
Shall be the truth.
shall be the truth,
The whole truth.
the whole truth,
And nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Nichol, can I apologise for the fact that you've been kept waiting so long? I hope you've been looked after. Good, I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
Mr. Glasgow.
Please, sir. Could you give the court your full name, please, sir?
Mark Patrick Nichol.
Mr. Nichol, in front of you, you have a black folder, and in that should be a statement from you together with an exhibit. And can I check that what you've got available to you is the statement that you prepared and signed on the 11th of December of last year, which was a statement you wrote in response to a request for information sent to you by the inquiry?
That's correct.
And I'm sure that you have had an opportunity to look at that statement before coming into court this afternoon. And I hope as well you've had a chance to look at your exhibit NN1, which is the transcript of a conversation that you had with a source of yours. Can I check you've got both of those available to you?
I do.
Insofar as your evidence is concerned, Mr Nicholl, would you like your statement to the inquiry dated the 11th of December of last year to stand as your evidence?
I would.
What I would like to do is to ask you a few questions about that statement and then to consider some of the material that the inquiry asked for your help with, and then to look at the transcript. And as with every witness who comes into court, if I ask a question that you don't understand, it's my fault, not yours. Please ask me to rephrase it or to repeat it. Of course I will do so. And if I say something which is wrong, you must correct me. And also, if you don't know where I am in your statement or in an exhibit, then you tell me, and I will do everything I can to assist you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr Nicholl, are you currently employed by Associated Newspapers Limited as the Defence and Diplomacy Editor for the Daily Mail?
I am.
Have you been employed by Associated Newspapers since 2012?
Yes, in one whole period, yes.
And did you take up your current position as the Defence and Diplomacy Editor for the Daily Mail in February of 2021?
I did.
Prior to that, were you the Defence Editor at the Mail on Sunday?
I was.
The Defence Correspondent for the Mail on Sunday?
I was.
And in particular, insofar as the activities of the SAS and other UK Special Forces units are concerned, have you been reporting on their activities as a journalist and author since 2001?
Yes, correct.
So for more than 2 decades now.
Correct.
One of the pieces of information you provided to the inquiry is that you have visited Afghanistan on 3 occasions. The first in 2002 as part of an exercise to research a book that you were writing on SAS operations in Afghanistan.
That's correct.
And the second 2 occasions, one in 2013, which was a Ministry of Defence escorted visit whilst you were on assignment for the Mail on Sunday. And then again, the same exercise in late December 2015 through to early January 2016.
Yes, the 2015-16 one, which went over Christmas and New Year, was not escorted. It was
Was that simply as part of your employment for the Mail on
It
Sunday
was.
at that time?
correct.
You were sent a request for a statement in September of last year by the inquiry, and it was in connection with 2 articles that you had written. Can I take you in your statement to paragraph 7? And in a moment, what I'll ask you to do is to look to the screen and to look to the content of those articles. But first, to your statement, please, sir. The request was in respect of an article published on the 9th of July of 2017, and the second in respect of an article published in the Mail on Sunday on the 1st of December 2019.
That's correct.
Is the first article from 2017 entitled "The Truth About SAS Shoot to Kill Night Raids by Hero of 200 Secret Ops"?
It is.
And underneath that headline, various information is provided which will turn to it. But as to the second article, is that entitled "SAS Soldier, quotes, executed children in Afghan raid," close quotes.
It is.
Now, what I'd like to do with your help, please, is to clarify this before we embark on the content of the articles. And the first one is already brought up, which is very helpful. Thank you. Insofar as there is any fact stated within either of these articles, at the time you wrote them, were those facts true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They were.
Since the publication of either of those articles, have you become aware of information which casts a doubt on the content of what is in either of those articles?
No.
Insofar as you have personal memory of these articles, I assume it's safe to conclude you recall writing them.
Mm-hmm.
But as to the details which are set out within them, do you now, as at today, have a clear memory of how and when and from whom you got those details?
Yes, particularly the first one. It's the more memorable of the 2.
What I'd like to do, please, sir, is to look to the 2 articles first of all. I hope that we could do that before we inevitably have to take a break for lunch, and I'm sorry if it means you're only in the witness box for a short period of time. But so that you know what I would like to do, having looked at the articles, I'd like to then turn back chronologically, for you at least, to look at how you came by the information which you used to stand up those articles. So the first article, which we know was first published in July, the 9th of July of 2017, the article bears your name, writing for the Mail on Sunday at the time. And the title, as you just explained to us, was "The Truth About SAS Shoot-to-Kill Night Raids by the Hero of 200 Secret Ops. Soldier breaks ranks to defend elite unit from witch hunt, but says illegal killings were, quotes, unwritten rule of our job, close quotes." There are then 3 bullet point subheadings to that title. First, a former SAS soldier has admitted to the Mail on Sunday that illegal killings were an unwritten rule of our job, and that is put in quotes, but strongly defended the regiment's actions. Second, his account comes after claims emerged that SAS members killed unarmed civilians in cold blood and falsified mission reports. And third, he revealed how he took part in 200 night raids between 2010 and 2013, many investigated as potential war crimes by the RMP, the Royal Military Police. As to the body of the article, Mr. Nicholl, does it read as follows? An SAS soldier has sensationally lifted the lid on the elite regiment's controversial shoot-to-kill policy in Afghanistan, the subject of a multi-million-pound investigation by military police. In the first media interview with any SAS member to take part in operations included in the war crimes probe, the former trooper admitted to the Mail on Sunday that illegal killings were, quotes, an unwritten rule of our job, close quotes, but strongly defended the regiment's actions. His gripping account of top-secret night operations in Afghanistan comes after claims emerged that SAS members had killed unarmed civilians in cold blood and falsified mission reports. The battle-hardened soldier told how the central claims levelled against the SAS were flawed, he said, and there are then several sub-points set out. First, unarmed civilians were routinely killed, but only after high-level intelligence confirmed their identity as Taliban commanders rather than civilians.
It's unarmed Afghans, not unarmed civilians.
I'm so sorry, I do apologise. Unarmed Afghans were routinely killed, but only after high-level intelligence confirmed their identity as Taliban commanders rather than civilians. Second, over a single year, the SAS's D and G squadrons killed more than 600 enemy fighters, some of whom could have been captured. The soldier insisted there was no point taking prisoners because they would be released days after being handed over to the Afghan police. Third, in exceptional circumstances, SAS troops did plant weapons on the bodies of unarmed Taliban commanders who'd been killed, one of the central accusations levelled at the SAS, but said it was the only way they would be believed, even after gathering huge amounts of high-tech evidence to prove they were terrorists. And fourth, the SAS has also been accused of falsifying reports to make it appear friendly Afghan troops had shot Taliban fighters rather than Special Forces soldiers. He admitted this happened, but said it was because they'd been ordered to exaggerate the involvement of the Afghan National Army for political reasons. Speaking exclusively to this newspaper on condition of anonymity, the soldier revealed how he took part in 200 night raids between 2010 and 2013, many investigated as potential war crimes by the RMP. He also admitted civilians, including children, had died when operations went wrong, but said, quotes, "Our accusers say that some of the killings which took place were unlawful, but we only targeted those responsible for orchestrating the campaign of violence directed towards British troops across Helmand province. We went in hard, and I admit the tactics do sound gruesome, but these were bad men. We hunted them down only after their guilt had been established by a network of local informants as well as our various high-tech assets," close quotes. He also told how Taliban fighters went to great lengths to avoid being identified, and then quotes, "They wouldn't be seen waving rifles around. Similarly, they wouldn't make mobile phone calls. They would employ another Afghan to make them on their behalf because they knew we were listening to what they were saying. So when someone is careful to cover their tracks, what do? Arresting them was pretty pointless because they would only be held for a few days before being released. So for me, the end justified the means, close quotes. As part of Operation Northmoor, the RMP has apparently gathered credible evidence of illegal SAS operations, including unlawful killings, false imprisonment and assault. But the Mail on Sunday understands no soldiers have been formally questioned. The £6 million inquiry had been expected to run until 2021, but the Ministry of Defence recently told investigators to finish their work this summer, raising fears the government was seeking to cover up war crimes. At its peak, the RMP was looking at 52 allegedly suspicious killings by UK Special Forces units, but it is understood this has been scaled down to just one incident in Helmand Province in 2011, when 4 members of the same family were shot dead by the SAS in a night raid on a village. The investigation also found SAS commanders doctored official battle reports to make it look as if Afghan troops they were mentoring had shot dead the Taliban. Video footage obtained by the RMP clearly revealed British soldiers had done the killing. By discovering this inconsistency, investigators thought they had exposed a cover-up. But the SAS soldier told the Mail on Sunday there was a political motive behind their misrepresentation of real events in the war zone. Open quotes. From 2010 to 2013, we were under strict instructions from the top of the MOD to do everything possible to suggest the Afghans were improving militarily and would be capable of stemming the Taliban tide after our departure, he said. And then the quotation continued. So yes, they were given undue credit for successful operations. You would then get generals and defence ministers boasting about how well the Afghan forces were doing, which used to make us laugh. We knew how bad they were, and we only took them along to put an Afghan face on a mission. It's pretty rich for the RMP to accuse us of war crimes on that basis, because they were as familiar with this political drive as we were. Afghan troops were to be made to look good, close quotes. The SAS soldier also acknowledged that after he and his colleagues killed unarmed Taliban, they occasionally planted weapons on the corpses. He insisted this was not part of a cover-up, but said that only by producing a pistol or rifle and placing it by the body could they convince Afghan police the dead had been actively involved in the insurgency. And then a quotation continues from your source. The RMP got the wrong idea about this. We were forced to take such steps because the Afghan police and courts didn't work on phone intercepts or fingerprints. Any high-tech evidence against the Taliban immediately went out the window. They would only access possession of a weapon or drugs as proof of guilt or Taliban activity. So yes, we carried weapons to give us that, and then you've put an additional word, legal protection. So it would read, so yes, we carried weapons to give us that legal protection, and the local police would note the serial numbers and we would think no more of it. I don't think we did wrong. We adapted our tactics to deal with the enemy. And the quotation continues, the RMP knew at the time how we operated, so why come after us now? RMP officers attended the same briefings before missions when senior officers told us kill or capture. That was kill as a first option, capture as a second option, not the other way round. Before, when we did arrest Taliban commanders, they spent just a few days in custody being served tea before being released. We got fed up with that and got smart. And that ends that particular quotation. And the article then continues. The SAS's tactics led to huge numbers of Taliban being recorded as killed in action. The soldier said over a 12-month period, D and G squadrons killed a combined total of more than 600. Victims included some of the Taliban's leading bomb makers, weapons smugglers, and potential suicide bombers. The soldier said, and then the quotation begins, we killed 2 Taliban who were preparing to launch a suicide attack on a British base near Kajaki in northern Helmand. Their suicide belts were good to go, and I remember seeing piles of human hair beside them because they'd shaved themselves to prepare for their entry into the afterlife. I also saw the Afghan police uniforms they were going to wear, so British troops wouldn't have known they were enemy fighters. These men were shot dead at close range and their bodies were dumped in the back of an Afghan pickup truck. This vehicle and the bodies were discovered the following day by other British forces who got quite a shock. And that ends that particular quotation. And then the article continues, but there were occasions when missions ended in the loss of innocent lives and devastating injuries to children. The sights and sounds still haunt the SAS soldier who, like many of his colleagues, later sought psychiatric help. He said, and then the quotation begins, "We've been tracking a senior Taliban guy who was gun running either side of the Pakistan border, bringing in weapons and explosives for the roadside bombs, a major player. We watched him coming into Afghanistan with his deadly cargo and found the cache in the desert. We requested an airstrike and a bomb was dropped. There was a huge blaze as the guns and a lot of ammunition were destroyed. A few hours later, we were dropped off in the desert by helicopter and marched 12 kilometres to the target to assess what remained of the site. The area was heavily defended and we killed at least 5 enemy fighters on the approach to the target. When we eventually got there, we heard screaming coming from underneath a pile of carpets. We pulled them back to see children who had been horrifically wounded. Years later, I can't get it entirely out of my head. While the incident was fully investigated by the Royal Military Police and all UK personnel were cleared, it still leaves a terrible feeling." And that ends that particular quotation from your source. An MOD spokesman said, and then a quotation begins, "Our military served with great courage and professionalism, and we proudly hold them to the highest standards. Where credible allegations are raised, it is right they are effectively investigated by an independent police force like the Royal Military Police. They have found no evidence of criminal behaviour by the armed forces in Afghanistan, have discontinued over 90% of the 675 allegations made, and less than 10 investigations now remain." That concludes that particular article which you wrote and was first published in July of 2017. And I'm not going to descend into the detail at this stage as to how you came by the information that's in it, but can I simply ask you this? Where we see quotations attributed to an individual, are those quotations from a source with whom you spoke?
Yes, as my witness statement makes clear, in order to make what he's saying readable and easily digestible, there is his quotes have not been changed in terms of meaning, but they're put into a simpler form of language for the reader to understand. But they convey his feeling and his view accurately.
So in terms of the essence of what your source told you, when you look back at the article and having refreshed your memory to the discussions you had with the source, are you confident that that article properly captures the essence of what he told you?
Very much so.
And just this, before we move to the second article, insofar as you were able to conduct appropriate inquiries into that source, were you confident when you spoke to the source that that source either had been or still was a serving member of UK Special Forces?
Yes, I'd previously met him, as my witness statement includes, and he'd been vouched for by people I knew, and people I knew had obviously vouched for me with him. So, yes, I was confident.
And insofar as those people had vouched for him, were those people members of UK Special Forces?
Some were, some weren't.
So insofar as it's possible to say that you've done your due diligence before relying on him as a source, thinking back to everything you did then and reflecting on the content of the article now as at today, are you confident that your due diligence satisfied you that this source was a member of UK Special Forces?
Yes.
And indeed, were you confident that this source was a member of the SAS?
He was not serving at the time that I spoke to him.
But had been?
Correct.
Can I turn to the second article? It is shorter than the first. That's not a criticism, but it's simply that I hope that we can conclude that before we have to break for lunch.
Yes, please, Mr. Glasgow.
The second article, written by you in 2019 and published on the 1st of December, entitled "SAS Soldier is Quizzed by Commanders Over Execution of Suspected Bomb Maker and 3 Teenage Boys During Raid in Helmand Province in Afghanistan in 2012. And then 3 bullet points beneath that title. First, experienced warrant officer hauled before SAS commanders at base in Hereford. Second, he has previously served in Afghanistan and Iraq and remains on active I think it should be active duty rather than activity duty.
Yes.
And third, he was questioned about a suspected cover-up that involved planting evidence. And if we look to the body of the article itself that you wrote, an SAS soldier has been questioned over the alleged execution of a suspected bomb maker and 3 teenage boys during the war in Afghanistan, the Mail on Sunday can reveal. It is understood the experienced warrant officer has also been quizzed about a suspected cover-up involving the planting of evidence and doctoring of official documents, along with members of the elite team he led on the bungled raid in Helmand province in 2012. Sources say the soldier, a member of G Squadron who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, was hauled before SAS commanders at the regiment's base in Hereford last week, but remains on active duty. The dramatic development follows a BBC Panorama documentary last month that identified apparent failings in the initial Royal Military Police investigation into the killings of a suspected bomb maker and 3 teenage boys. An SAS source said, and there is now a quotation, "The proverbial has hit the fan inside the SAS base in the past couple of weeks following the TV documentary. Guys have been brought into regimental headquarters for interviews without coffee." That ends that particular quotation. The probe centres on the hunt for a key Taliban bomb maker in 2012, a year in which 44 British troops died in Helmand. The SAS had been tasked with so-called kill or capture raids, often under the cover of darkness, to disrupt the Taliban's coordinated attacks, and intelligence reports identified Faisal Mohammed, a 20-year-old living in the rural area of Loibag, as a target. The SAS team, joined by soldiers from the Afghan National Army, swooped on the village at 8 p.m. The warrant officer burst into a house where he is thought to have found Faisal sitting drinking tea with his brother Naik, 17, and 2 other boys, Ahmed Shah, 12, and Mohammed Tayeb, 14. He opened fire, killing all 4 instantly. Sabah Mohammed, the mother of Naik and Faisal, told Panorama the cups were full of blood. They had shot the boys in the head. Defence sources have claimed to the Mail on Sunday that the 4 were unarmed and that, in an attempt to justify the shootings, a pistol of the type used by Taliban commanders was placed next to the bodies. Official reports also referred to the presence of the pistol at the scene, and the warrant officer told the RMP, which investigated the case as part of Operation Northmoor that examined dozens of suspicious deaths involving special forces, that he had acted in self-defence because 2 of the 4 had weapons and the others appeared suddenly out of the shadows. However, photographs of the scene obtained by Panorama show bullet holes in the wall just 2 feet off the ground, supporting the family's claim that the 4 were sitting down. The RMP wanted the soldier to be charged with 4 counts of murder, but the Army's Service Prosecuting Authority refused. Last night, the SAS source said, quotes, "Why the military police believed what they were told about the pistol is anyone's guess. The blokes would carry these pistols with them for precisely this purpose, so when they shot someone who was unarmed, they could make it look like they posed an immediate threat and ensure they weren't investigated. This tactic, known as using drop weapons, was well known." And that ends that quotation. The government announced in 2017 that Operation Northmoor, which cost $6 million, was to be wound down. In the same year, the Mail on Sunday published an account of similar raids in Helmand by a recently retired SAS veteran of the Afghanistan campaign. In it, the soldier described illegal killings as, quotes, "an unwritten rule of our job," close quotes. Last night, a spokesman for the Ministry of Defence said, and the quotation begins, "These claims have already been fully investigated and the independent prosecutors judged that no charges should be brought." And does that conclude the article that you wrote and had published in December of 2019?
It does.
And again, just before we break for lunch, insofar as there are quotations that are attributed to sources, do those quotations, if not accurately record the words used, do they accurately record the meaning of what you were told by your source or sources?
They do.
And insofar as it was a source or more than one source who provided the information which led to this article, did you do your due diligence in respect of that person or persons to ensure that they were able to provide this level of detail to you?
Yes, there were people I'd known for a long time.
And were you confident that you could trust them with the information they were providing to you as accurate?
Yes.
Were it otherwise, would you have written this article, Mr. Nicholl?
No.
So I'm sorry that's taken a few more minutes than I'd hoped. But would that now be a convenient moment?
It would indeed. Mr. Glasgow, thank you. Mr. Nichols, thank you. We'll now break for lunch. I say to all witnesses, please do not discuss your evidence with anybody while you're in the box. All right?
No problem.
May we reconvene at 2 o'clock, please? All right. Thank you.